Hi, and welcome to Dear Art Producer. I am your host, Heather Elder, and today is June 12th, 2025, and we're lucky enough to be joined by two guests who have worked together for nearly 17 years. Throughout their career, jointly and apart, they've worked on projects for a variety of pharma brands. Hannah Wolfert is a senior content producer at Syneos Health and loves to wear lots of hats in order to get a project done. Kim Roemer, a content production business manager, has to have a 30,000-foot vision of the entire project. Together, they make clients' creative ideas come to life. I'm so excited to hear their perspectives on the current state of the industry and learn more about their unique career paths. Welcome, Hannah and Kim. Hello.
Hey.
Hey.
Thanks, Heather.
I'm so happy to have you both. And when I was writing the intro that you guys have worked together and known each other for nearly 17 years, I was trying to think back to when I met you. And I know it was at a Le Book that we met. And it has to have been like close to that long ago, don't you think? Maybe 12 years ago? A little bit more?
I think, it was probably at least 12 years ago, I would think. I vaguely remember that now, first meeting you at Le Book.
Le Book was so good for that in the early days. I mean, I'm sure it's still good for that. But, I don't know. It's just there were people from different parts of the country that would come that I wouldn't get a chance to meet. And then we'd meet at Le Book, and then every year you'd kind of come back. And I don't know. It was always a lovely time when I would see you down the hall, and then all of a sudden you'd be showing up at my booth. So
I remember that we'd worked, I don't know how long we'd worked together before we met you in person at Le Book. But what I remember about meeting you at Le Book was I was like, wow, Heather just has such a great California vibe. And I remember making drinks and shuffling them around. Maybe they even had umbrellas. And I just remember it's hard to work with people and really like them and often never meet them. And it's always so great. I remember just that stuck out in my mind.
Thank you. I know. Okay, now I'm remembering. I think we might have met at the first time we had martinis. I hired some model bartender to and because all I wanted was the shaking noise at my booth of the martinis so that I knew people would come over if they heard that. And they did.
Yeah. No, it was great. And it's always, to Kim's point, you work with so many people over the phone, over email that you don't necessarily ever meet in person. So being able to go to an event like Connections and actually meet, the people that you've worked with is just, it's so great.
It is great. And I feel like, obviously, we talk about this a lot on the podcast, how important relationships are. And Kim, I think you're right. I think you and I worked on a project, I think it was with Andy Anderson before we met in person. Mm-hmm. And that is obviously a great opportunity to get to know each other. But, sometimes if you're traveling around the country, which we were doing a lot at the time, sometimes, you might not be at the office or might be there when I get there and whatever. And so to have a place to meet up and actually put faces with names and have a minute to say hi was a really important time.
Yeah,
definitely.
Well, thank you for always making the trek. Okay, so let's talk a little bit, and let's start with you, Kim. I would love to hear a little bit about your, career path and how you came to be a business affairs manager and kind of what that role is like.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I discovered, I think in college that I loved creative stuff. I hadn't known that really about myself. And I took a art history 101 class and knew that it spoke to me. And I got an art history degree. I just followed my gut and I just loved it so much. And from there, just have been just sort of a lover of all things visual arts. But I was really lucky. I moved to New York and I got hired. I didn't even know, this was back when you looked for jobs in the newspaper at the library. It was a job interview for a position called an art buyer. And I thought it was probably going to be buying art for walls for this business. And I learned at the interview what the job actually was. Art buyer is an old school kind of term for content producer. And I got a job with a woman. Her name was Kathy Galata at a consumer agency in New York that hasn't existed for years. And that's really where I started in content production, and then moved to Columbus and was the first content producer at our company, where I've been ever since. At some point along the way, I just felt like it was time for a change, and our team needed a business manager, and I raised my hand for the position. It's really not any more interesting of a story than that. Yeah. So what I really like about it, I think, is that really I feel like kind of the sole purpose of my job. It's not really the sole purpose, but for me, it feels like the most important thing is just making the content producers' jobs easier.
Yes.
And so a lot of what I spend my time on is getting vendors set up and through procurement, seeing through contracts with procurement and legal, and moving through the PO and invoicing system. That's a huge part of what I do. And it takes up quite a bit of time. And then, there's a lot of other things that I do. I guess everything from helping bring on new resources to supporting people. I do like a random assortment of admin stuff. Hannah and I together actually host sessions about changes to our stock industry and our stock vendor relationships. I have regular meetings with our legal team and with our managers about AI and everything that's coming and happening with AI in the industry. That's what's generally coming to mind.
Well, I have a lot of questions around all of that. But before we dive into those questions, Hannah, tell us a little bit about your background and kind of what brought you to working with Kim.
Well, I have a fine art degree. My emphasis was in my area study was in photography. And I was an intern for a photographer in Columbus in college, and realized pretty quickly that, no, I don't want to be a commercial photographer. Like that's a hustle. But his studio manager, who is fabulous, I was like, I want to do what she does. And I guess I didn't know how to get there at the time. And so, I muddled through. I worked in textbook publishing for a while in their art department, and worked for some ad agencies. And then just by luck, a friend of mine who heads up our department, or our portion of Syneos, just came to me and said, "Hey, we're going to have this job opening. Do you think you want to apply?" And I did. And I think I interviewed with Kim, and then it was another 4 or 5 months before I interviewed with Kim and another person. And then it was another 4 or 5 months before I actually heard anything about the job. And I was so stoked, but it was finally, this is exactly what I want to do. I just know in my bones that that's what I want to do. But I remember, and I tell Kim this all the time, I can still remember the first day I met her when I interviewed, and I can still see her. I can see what she's wearing. And I can remember just sitting at the office talking not only about the position, but just the business and art. And I just thought, man, she's cool.
You found your place.
I want to work with this person because she's cool. So yeah.
You're too nice.
Oh,
Kim, do you remember that?
Totally.
Do you remember what Hannah was wearing?
I remember Hannah's first date. I do remember what she was wearing. Because, we're both just those kinds of people, I guess. But anything visual, I think, just is
yeah,
that's great.
Big visual people, you pick up on those things.
So, Kim, what are you known for on your team?
Gosh, Hannah honestly would probably have a better perspective.
Oh, okay. I love that. Let's ask Hannah.
Just your positivity. She's always positive. She's always like, you know, you have your days, or our teams have days where you just feel like you're getting slammed and things are really busy and crazy. And Kim's always coming in with something positive, or, you know, she's kind of our cheerleader.
And how about you, Kim? What about for Hannah?
Well, thanks for saying that, Hannah. That's nice. You know what? I have always thought, and I think it's safe to say that our team would agree with this, Hannah is a total workhorse. When I would cover for her, when she would go away, I'm always amazed at the amount of work she handles and juggles and does really well. I just am amazed that she can get as much done as she gets done. And I feel like she also is known for just being really lovely and sharing with her vast knowledge. She always wants to help and will offer a 2 cents because, you know, she has a lot of years of doing the job.
Thank you.
I would add her thoroughness.
Oh,
When I get an email from Hannah about a project, she's pretty much answered all my questions before I even ask them. And I know that probably sounds obvious to both of you, but from where I sit, there's so many times I hardly get nearly enough information. And it's really refreshing when Hannah reaches out, because I'm like, oh, okay, she knows what she's doing. She's on top of this. And she'll put the time in with me to talk about stuff, you know, and engage. And I love that.
Appreciate that. I think it's just producers in general, and maybe I'm generalizing, but I mean, I think a lot of us are type A personalities anyway, that we have to be thorough. We have to make sure all of our bases are covered. It's just part of what we do.
Yeah. Well, oh, and I would also add, you always, and I absolutely love this, you always send a handwritten thank you note.
yes. Yes.
Yeah. Man, I'm a big believer in
Me too.
writing.
Same thing.
Yep. Makes a big difference. I tried to instill that in my kids, and I swear, I think it backfired, because, like, there's, you know, my daughter, because she's a girl, I think, you know, and she's just like you, very type A, you know, like she'll still do it, but, you know, trying to get my boys to do a handwritten thank you note is difficult.
I think especially, like, I don't want to say it, but I'll say it, like kids these days.
Yeah. No, they have a different way of communicating.
They type on their laptops, they're on their phones, they don't. And I even noticed this with my hand skills are like worse than they used to be, because probably I type too much and I don't write.
Yeah.
So it might be harder for them to handwrite things.
Yeah.
They just haven't learned it.
But it really stands out, because how often do I get a handwritten thank you note? Like, rarely.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. Publicly thanking you for your thank you notes.
I do. I love it. I love writing notes.
So, Kim, tell me, what are the biggest misunderstandings or assumptions people have about business affairs?
Oh, gosh. I don't know a lot of other people in business affairs. I don't feel like that's something I've come up against, because I am the first business affairs person at our company. So
yeah, you're the first person. Like, I don't know of any other producer, and I don't, you know, I'm not privy to how other agencies work, but I don't know if they have people that do what Kim does, like just handles the paperwork, all the paperwork.
There are definitely more and more nowadays. And I would say I absolutely love the position.
Oh, okay.
It makes any agency that has a business affairs team that assigns a consistent person to the project, I feel like is my new best friend, because there's so, like you said in the beginning, Kim, there are so many points in the process for getting set up as a vendor, maybe, or figuring out the advances and the POs and the legal language and the, you know, all of it. And it's complicated. And Hannah, you're busy with a million other things.
And I was thinking about that, you know, kind of leading up to talking to you. And again, I feel confident in speaking for our whole team that what Kim does is just so invaluable. Like to have to like produce a photo shoot and do all of the things that Kim did, which we used to, each of us individually had to do, and stay on top of, like casting and locations and all the production stuff. It was like anxiety inducing.
Well, and both paths are equally important. Like
Yeah.
you can't hold up on the casting just because I need to have a signed PO, but I need a signed PO before I can start the casting.
Yeah.
So
and I
it's
definitely,
really hard.
yeah. I lose less sleep knowing Kim's taking care of my paperwork.
And me too, right? Because the process takes a long time. And you and I know sometimes we can't wait for all the ducks to be in a row. And because I know Kim and I know what she's doing and that she's in that role and like it's happening.
Yeah, it's so helpful to know that. And Kim and I work closely together throughout we start even at the bidding process when I am bidding a project, and I will tell her like, these are the vendors I'm bidding with. These, maybe two of them are new and one of them we know is in the system. And so you just know, like, if we go with this person, it might be a little easier because they're going to, already be set up. But then we know kind of like what we're going to be dealing with once the job is awarded. And that, whether they're in our system or not, doesn't affect whether the job gets awarded to them. But you just, you know how to like point your brain in which direction.
Well, and it's interesting that you just said that, because I've heard from many agencies, especially now with all the, holding companies merging and how difficult it is to like get in the system. I've had some producers tell me, "Oh, Heather, thank God you're in the system, because I wouldn't have been able to consider you if you weren't." They are like anti adding new people to the system.
And Kim's not that. And I have to give her a lot of, praise for going, when we do have new vendors, getting them set up in the system, because it's not an easy process. And she's always really good at it. And I feel like it's changing all the time. But
can you explain to the people who are listening, when we say it's not easy, like I know what I have to do on my end, and I have to do the same thing for every time I become a vendor. So it's not that difficult for me, right? I have all my paperwork in order. I have to sign some stuff and I have to, send you a copy of a few things. What happens on your end? Like, what does that process look like?
It's become a lot more streamlined in the past year or so. At this point in time, it's gathering it's gathering financial paperwork from the vendor. It's gathering an NDA, a W-9, and then I have to take that information and put it into a unique Syneos document and send it to a team that reviews it all. There's usually quite a bit of back and forth and questions. Sometimes it can get mucky, but that's the long and short of it. At this point, I think that for a few reasons, it's gotten more streamlined and easier. One of the things that I've worked on a lot over the past couple of years is building relationships. As you were saying before, it's all about relationships. Mm-hmm. Building relationships with sort of the leaders of the different teams that I'm constantly engaging with to try to get vendors set up, and then the key people in the other departments that I work with to get contracts in place and payments made. And building those relationships with those people has made such a difference for multiple reasons. So I think that the more time-consuming part is reviewing the estimates and the terms and getting all of that language and agreement for both parties. I know, Heather, you and I worked on something not too long ago, and, it takes a while sometimes.
Yeah.
And depending on the project, we're required to have quite a lengthy legal document signed. So all of that takes a while, and it's kind of a game of beat the clock, because by the time you have the job awarded, everybody knows in this business, everybody wanted the project to start like a week ago, right? So you're just the people on your side, the producer, the line producer, casting, location scouting, that all needs to happen now. And yet the folks on your side want to have a purchase order and an advance. So I'm working as quickly as I can to get things through the hoops on my side so that things don't get delayed on your side, basically. So it's like a big jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah. No, and I could appreciate why someone like you is so important, because years ago, we'd approve the bid would get approved. Either someone would sign it or they'd send us a PO super quickly. And I know the artists back then hardly read them, right?
Yep.
They would sign, it would just take 2 seconds. Oh, I just got the PO. Okay, we'll sign it, send it back. And that was it. So of course, things got more complicated, especially with COVID and the liability and indemnity and, many more production issues and terms and usage and stuff that people were paying attention to. But no time was being built into the schedule to allow for that back and forth.
Yes.
And it became a bit of a struggle. And you had to have a few, quick solves for okay, how can we get this project going while I'm sending it to my lawyers, you're sending it to yours. We're having a little bit of back and forth and we're working on it. And that's where I think the relationships have really become important, is because if you send me an email or you sign something or you give me permission, before I have that PO, I'm more likely to do it for someone that I know and I have a relationship with than for someone brand new.
Definitely. Hannah and I often talk about the days, and this is literally how it was 20 years ago. We would create a purchase order on a system. We literally entered the information. The PO was instantly created, and we would walk a piece of paper to one of the company partners or CEOs 2 flights up to have our advance money released.
Yeah.
You literally walked in his office, said, this is the PO and the invoice for the photo shoot. Will you sign it? He'd maybe ask 1 or 2 questions, sign it. And then you walked down the hall to the accounts payable department and you walked to their office and you said, here's this invoice that needs to get paid as soon as possible.
I miss that.
My gosh, I miss it so much.
And, it's just talking about all of this. It's so important to bring up the advance, because that is absolutely critical. And thankfully, not just the agencies we have relationships with, but I'd say 95% of the agencies and clients directly that we work with take the advance seriously. And it is critical because whether it is a $50,000 production or a, $750,000 production, being asked to front that money is not possible. Even if you're an incredibly successful artist and have plenty of cash flow, you've probably got multiple jobs happening and you're at different places in the production. So for me to front the money puts me in a bind.
Yeah.
So thank you for everything you do to make those advances happen. And for any of your, people who at your agency who might be listening to this, know that so much happens because of the relationships that the two of you have built with your vendors.
Yeah. I'll just say this too. I think that for me, it was imperative for me to have been a producer for a long time before being in the business affairs role, because personally, I feel like I wouldn't have had an understanding of the flow and of the relationships and all of the different things without having been on that side of the fence.
Yeah. And I think for our team, we're so lucky because you do have that perspective. If you would just have somebody with, some business person come in and, attempt to do it, I think there would have been so many more headaches.
Well, if they don't understand the job,
they don't understand the business and how things flow. And that's
exactly
great about Kim, is that she understands, she understands what we're going, the producer is going through as far as, the production and trying to get an advance paid. But also she understands the process that she has to go through to make all of that happen. And I think, thankfully, the people on our team understand that as well. It's a very symbiotic relationship.
Okay, so let's move on to talking a little bit about the industry in general right now. It is evolving so quickly. I love going down memory lane and thinking about things when things were super easy, being nostalgic during that time. But, here we are and things are just moving at such a fast speed. Don't put too much thought into this. Just tell me what comes to your mind when I ask the question. But do you think there's a word that kind of defines our industry right now?
Eclectic.
Interesting.
I would say fluid.
Yeah.
It's just constantly evolving.
That's great. I love that they're both positive words. And what sort of changes are you seeing at your agency? And I know AI is an obvious one, so feel free, we can jump into that conversation right now. But just in general, Hannah, let's start with you. What sort of changes are you seeing?
Yeah. AI, I feel like AI is the big one. It's kind of the new shiny thing that everybody wants to try. And I think that myself and Kim and the producers are doing what we can to stay on top of it, to have the most up-to-date information for our teams. But it's not always easy because it's changing every day. And I feel like what you tell them one day is going to be different the next.
What are you seeing, Kim, in regards to AI in your contracts and stuff?
Honestly, in terms of contracts, I haven't experienced much that's AI specific, but we are moving into working with more AI external vendors. Yeah. So that's going to be changing. That's going to be a new zone for us. And obviously we have a ton of AI going on with our internal studio, which Hannah and I are a part of. So I think that I'm just trying to really prepare myself a little bit more for it and think about sort of what's coming down the line. For example, we had a meeting about 6 months ago regarding our standard talent release and how we may or may not, I went to the legal team and said, I wonder if we need to start talking about having some AI language in our talent release, because we know that any minute we're going to have a photo shoot using humans, and at some point someone's going to want to manipulate the people in those images using AI.
Yeah. And I recall the production I worked on last year, the agents, and it was in Canada, and they were Canadian talent agents, but they had me add an AI clause to our contract. Yeah. They wanted it so basically
to protect the talent.
Yeah. Yep. So we couldn't go back and manipulate talent with AI or.
Yeah. I mean, I have that in ours, right? In our terms and conditions. And now we, and a lot of times people don't sign our estimates. So it's up to us to make sure that that information goes into the PO. But it's important because we need to make sure, especially for some of my artists who have a lot of repetitive business with the same client, there's enough content there to, maybe create their own model to be now creating derivative works off of those images. And then they're putting themselves out of business immediately, right? If you can take that body of work and then create new work with new products somehow, like with the same look. So we've had to rewrite some of our language and approach those long-term clients to have conversations around what that looks like. Because we don't want to keep them from being able to use the tools, but we need to be able to be a part of that process somehow because we've helped shape that vision. And it's our work that they want to, use as a basis for it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
therein lies, I think, the crux of it is trying to find a space to embrace the new technology, which is really mind-blowing in a lot of ways. And there's so much interesting stuff coming out of it. It's constantly changing. I've been really impressed with so much that I've seen that's been created solely in AI. But trying to find, and Hannah and I feel really strongly about this, I mean, just we've both come up through the craft, through photography and copyright. And we, part of the job of being a content producer is understanding, we're not lawyers, but we have to understand how copyright law works.
Right.
Trying to protect artists and protect, the various parties involved while also making neat stuff with new tools. It's trying to find that space.
It is. And it's a fine line between, again, protecting the copyright, the photographer, and also making sure that our teams get what they want. It's like when a team comes to me and you get wild questions sometimes, and you just have to explain to them, like, well, that, the photographer still this is their work too. It's, yes, we came up with the idea, and we have, we are the genesis of the idea, but we are collaborating with a photographer, with an illustrator, with whomever to create this work, and they still have a right to it as well. And there's got to be some understanding of that. And so you kind of have to protect both sides, and it's kind of a fine line.
Yeah. And I equate it sometimes, and my position on this might change, of course, because everything's changing so quickly, but like think about when CGI came around, right? Obviously Photoshop came before that, but let's just remember there was that transition, photographers, then there was Photoshop, then there was CGI, and photographers are trying to figure out how to make themselves part of that, a valuable part of that process, right? Mm-hmm. And there were some who just kind of, and still just leave it up to the CGI artist to deal with it, right? Yep. And they kind of give their little inputs here and there. And there are others who are very much like CGI directors, right? Yeah. Where they are fully a part of it, because from the beginning, the previous process is very important. So you need the photographer's eye and understanding of lighting and, shadow, all the things that are important.
Yeah, totally.
So it's very important to have somebody who understands that. So I feel like we're kind of in that same space with AI.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's like, they do. They're going to have to, it's a new tool that they're going to have to learn, like Photoshop 20 years ago, it's another new tool that they are going to have to learn to use and figure out how to integrate it into their process. It's like you have a photographer who only shot, film, having to learn to use a digital camera, because otherwise you might be out of business.
Yeah. Well, and I think, Hannah, you and I were talking about this before we got on the call today. And if you don't want to embrace AI or use it because your work is like, I'm a lifestyle photographer and I take, natural light images, and there's, AI is not going to help me, I'm not interested at all. Okay, that is perfectly fine. There's a spot for you in the world.
Right.
Except you still have to understand it, because you might have to sell against it someday, right?
Yeah. And that's, as I was saying, like when we started talking about AI several years ago, I was very much like not resistant, but not jumping on the bandwagon immediately, just because, for me, there's the ethics of it. Like, I don't want to just recreate people, and have them not be real people. I don't know. But I very quickly also knew that, like, no, I need to learn about this. I need to know about it because it's going to be part of my job, and I need to understand it, to your point. So if I need to speak to it, I can speak to it. And if I need to speak, against it, or explain to them, a creative director, whoever, why it might not be the best course of action to take, or why I can't take it, then I can speak to that as well.
Okay, so along those lines, what are your clients and your creatives asking of you right now in terms of projects? Like what type of things requests are coming to you?
A lot of the same stuff. I mean, it goes across the board, photo shoots. I think everything is much more integrated, or, they want the stills, they want B-roll, they want, everything across the board, web, social. We do a ton of social stuff now. So you just have to really be on your toes and make sure that you're covered for everything.
And what type of vendors are you hiring for social stuff?
Well, it's whomever we're hiring, whether it's a CG house.
So it's part of a bigger project.
Yeah, it's part of the whole package. When I go in with the usage, if I'm emailing you and I say this is our usage, I try to be, as clear as possible everything that we're going to use that for.
Yeah, totally get it. I thought you meant you were just a lot of your projects were solely social.
No, but
You're saying it's just one part of the integrated.
I feel like it's become a bigger part of we're doing this campaign of stills, but we're going to pull this through to social, and so we need to consider that when we're doing framing, when we're doing, filming, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And do the majority of your projects also have motion?
I don't know when the last time I worked on solely a stills shoot.
But it's been like that a long time.
Yeah.
So I think, though, my next question along those lines would be, knowing that, and I guess it depends on the type of motion, obviously, that you're doing, but if it's a motion forward job, are you looking at directors? Or are you looking at photographers who also can direct? Are you going through a production company? Like what does the process look like?
Yeah, for me, I think it depends on the project. And I think it varies from producer to producer, how we're used to approaching a job. For me, I started as more of a stills producer, and I really had to learn quickly how to also produce a motion shoot. So for me, I will go and look for a photographer that does stills and motion. But then I've also learned, to expand that into maybe I should look for a DP or look for somebody who's going to hire a DP to handle this. Where I think that if you talk to one of the other producers on our team, any of the others, they might say, we just go to a production house who would handle it all. And they hire the photographer and the DP. Or some, I think, are more skilled at and more familiar with DPs, and they would start there. So I think it really, I feel it kind of depends on the producer.
Yeah, that makes sense.
How they're used to approaching the project.
So if you have a conceptual project that requires CGI, are you more inclined to reach out to a CGI studio or VFX studio, let's say, and have them choose the photographer if there's one that's needed? Or do you tend to reach out to a photographer and let them choose the partner, the CGI partner?
That's an interesting question.
I think it depends. It's if it's a CGI heavy job that has a little bit of photography, then I'm going to reach out to the CGI company and let them choose the photographer, because I figure they know who's going to do the job best.
Yeah.
But vice versa, if it's a stills motion heavy project, then I know, some of the photographers, I know certain photographers like to use certain CGI or post how, and I'm like, that's fine. You can figure it out.
Yeah. So there's a lot of, in this integrated world, right? There are a lot of vendors that you have to keep track of and relationships you have to cultivate.
Yeah. I guess in a nutshell, it's I don't want to dictate who a vendor or a creative person uses to get their job done. I figure they know who's going to do the best job.
Yeah.
Kind of like when a photographer says, I want to use this producer, I don't typically dictate a producer. I'm just okay, if you feel that this person
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, and same thing, if you're marrying up two different kinds of artists, it's mutually beneficial if they have worked together before and it was a good collaboration. You're going to get I think, better end product.
Yeah. And I always enjoy introducing, photographers to CGI people or vice versa. Sometimes people will come to me and say, hey, I'm looking for a good post house or a good CGI person who have you worked with that you like. And I'm always happy to make introductions. And I think that's one of the things I like about this industry is now more people that I know and like know each other and work together. And I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I do think there's very loyal relationships, right? The producer artist relationship, the CGI, like people find their people. But I do think the idea that like we work on a project and then we're done with that project and we move on allows for opportunities to mix things up a little bit. And I like that a lot because I feel like I learned so much in every job. I've been doing this for so long, but I'm still learning on every job. And there's so many great vendors, and like I want to get to know them all.
Yeah. I think that's the best part, is that, every project is a little different and you learn something new and you're just like, oh, wow, that's cool. Like, just continuing to be able to learn something new.
So somebody who wants to get your attention, how do they do that? And also, Kim, do artists, photographers and directors, CGI talent, like, do they need to have you on their list? Do they need to be targeting you as well?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Well, when you say how are they going to get our attention, do you mean just through social media or?
Yeah, like sharing their work and letting you know that they're out there. And, you have obviously plenty of people that you know how to go find, but you want to see new work or get to know new artists. How do you do that? Like, how do people break through?
I mean, I'll say for me, I do think that I get targeted a lot. I don't know if it's because people don't realize that I'm not a content producer anymore or because they're thinking, oh, business manager is also an avenue to get hired and that kind of thing. I think that, I help shepherd new vendors in and set up, digital portfolio reviews. So I think that I'm a person that creatives and vendors should be trying to connect with. But I feel like, I'll just say this briefly because I feel like, this is more of a question for Hannah, but I still feel like I miss having physical things to look at. Hannah and I both miss having portfolio shows where you're not looking at an iPad. I miss those big, beautiful portfolios with the gorgeous prints and the binding work. And they're just incredible works of art. But I miss the person-to-person connection of those kinds of events. But I think that really in seeing new work, probably I'm looking at the reps that I know and respect the best. And I'm looking at their work, and I'm also just looking at what I'm receiving probably through my email and just from being out in the world and being at museums and those kinds of things.
Yeah, I agree. I think that for me, like emails, I get, emails from different agents, all kinds of agents. And if I see something in that email that I really like, I'll respond and be like, hey, this is really cool work, and sometimes that leads to more conversation. Or, if I see something, like in a magazine, I'm obsessed with magazines. So, because I always have been, like the visual, like the photography. Yeah. And then if I see something in a magazine, I'll go, who shot this campaign? And then I'll kind of go down that rabbit hole.
And what does that rabbit hole look like for you? Is it website, Instagram, LinkedIn?
Instagram, I would say website and Instagram. Those are the two places that I really look at the photography. Like if I like their photography on their website, I'll go to their Instagram to see like what else do they shoot, or can they shoot others? And sometimes it's just the same, their work, and sometimes it's more personal stuff. And that too, like when I'm looking for a photographer for a project or a videographer, whoever, and I see their website and like maybe they're a good fit, but there's not the perfect fit, I'll go to their Instagram and see like, well, what else can they shoot? Do they have anything different there that I could probably, maybe throw out and see, look, their website doesn't have this, but look at what they're putting on Instagram. They can't, do what we need them to do.
What's a website that is really functional for you? And what's one that's annoying and makes you just like click right out?
If it has too many moving pictures right on the homepage, I'm like, it gives me a headache. I'm like, nope, I can't look at this. Yeah. Or like in an email, if I get an email where the photos are constantly changing. I'm like, ugh, no, I can't look at that.
Yeah.
Show me one good static image. That's what I'm going to like latch onto. And that'll pull me into like, oh, I want to see what this person is doing.
I agree. I was also going to say that I feel like the New York Times magazines, there's the regular New York Times magazine, but then they often have different magazine inserts.
Yeah.
And that's like a treasure trove of new work to look.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can tell they value photography.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a really, it's a treat. It's the reason to get the newspaper.
It is. It really is. Kim would send me like clips and like whole Times magazines and like, look at this, look at that. And I finally just bit the bullet and signed up for the Sunday Times so I could get it myself.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, let's quickly, we're going to be winding down soon, but I want to touch on like budgets and estimates and usage. Kim, talk to me a little bit about how you collaborate with producers to make sure the like budgets and estimates align with usage rights and licensing costs, and like maybe what are some common issues with usage rights, and what can we as reps and producers think about ahead of time to avoid them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that generally by the time I'm engaged in the flow of a project, the licensing has been discussed and worked out. And is in, the approved estimate. I think some of the things that are important right now is there's just so many different digital platforms and things to consider, different kinds of TV. Obviously, we have a million different ways of watching TV. There's the difference between, paid social media and unpaid social media. All of those things need to be considered and discussed. And so that's something that I think that's not new. It's just that there's more options and more things to consider. I think that, the tricky thing with licensing, I think it's the age-old thing. It's like a lot of teams and clients want 5 years, or they want a buyout, quote unquote buyout. And I always put air quotes around that one.
I think when they say they want to buy out, I'm like, no, you don't.
Yeah. Thank you.
It becomes, what do you really think is going to be? Let's talk about the reality of what is probably the reality of a campaign shelf life. And again, like with a buyout or with some huge long term, it's like you're going to be paying. First of all, a lot of people won't do a buyout, obviously, but also you're going to be paying a lot of money that you don't need to be paying because your campaign is not going to go on forever.
Right.
So it's just trying to find a space in how much money do we have out of the gate? How much time would we like to get? And, what can we pay for at that point? The relicensing process is always tricky, I feel like. It's multi-layered. I think it's one of the things that takes the longest, honestly, for a producer and is really overlooked. When you have 20 talent to reach out to and a photographer to negotiate with, it takes hours. You have so many different parties to contact. Often you're trying to negotiate for 2 or 3 different options. People will reply with one or not reply at all. Then you're trying to get phone. I mean, it takes a ton of time.
Because I always start a spreadsheet.
Yep. Same.
That's how I organize my brain for something like that. I'm like, I need a spreadsheet.
And do you expect an additional year of usage to be less or more than what was originally charged? Let's say 5 years have gone by and they want to negotiate more use, another year.
I expect it to be more. I think Hannah and I were talking about this recently. She's got a better memory than me. I think it's sort of a standard 10 or 15%, no?
Yeah. I just always look at what we originally paid and add, I don't know, usually like 15% to it. And even then I sometimes think, well, I hope that's enough. Like, because it's changing,
Yeah, it does. And we always try and have some sort of mathematical, I've been doing it for so long. I can tell you, what it's worth in the industry, right? And as a whole, but I also try and have some sort of mathematical, so it makes sense.
Well, definitely, because and we appreciate that because that's something I have to go, then I'm going to have to go and explain to the account team, when they ask, well, why is this higher or why is it? And I just have, I have to be able to basically explain the math to them.
Yeah.
It is why it is.
And I think a lot of times what we're doing, even if I'm not asked for it, I'm putting on the estimate what the extra usage will be because I offer a discount if they purchase it now.
That's something
That's
that we have.
brilliant.
That I've definitely learned over the years is like, get the renewal cost up front and on the original contract, because that way and that saves you time, really.
It saves you time and also can make me a little bit more money because for my artists more money, because if you're buying 3 years and I say, here, an extra year is going to cost you, this plus 10%. But if you purchase it now, I'll give you a 10% discount.
Yeah.
Your client might be like, okay, give me the 4th year.
Yeah.
I think that's brilliant on your part, Heather, and also so beneficial. I'm moving through a couple of relicensings right now, and having the pre-negotiated renewals is a game changer.
It's a game changer.
It really is.
Yeah. So we have talked about so much and we left so much unsaid. I feel like I want you guys to come back. But before we leave, I just have a couple of questions for you guys. One of which is just thinking about the rest of 2025. Are you optimistic about where the industry is going in terms of the amount of work that might be available for people? I know there are a lot of people out there who are afraid and are slow and are feeling like, they're going out of business. So is there, can we channel some of Kim's positivity? And, do we feel good about the future? Or are we still a bit unsure? Because my answer would be that I'm unsure. So
I think I always try to be optimistic because I think, I get to a point in the year where like, oh my gosh, I've only done like kind of one big project, and like, what if I don't, get to do another big shoot this year? But then I always remind myself, it's like, well, it always takes like one day you don't have it, and the next day, you have a team coming to you wanting to do a big project. So it's, it's just, I'm going to remain optimistic.
Yeah.
But
I feel like, I guess I'm speaking selfishly for our company and our team. We are so busy.
Yeah.
And I feel like busier than we've been in May, June, maybe some years. So I feel optimistic about it. I'm excited to see how things change. I vividly remember staying home with my boys for 6 years and coming back and having the world switch to digital and having CGI on the table and thinking like, oh my God, my mind was blown. And it, as you pointed out, Heather, like, remember when CGI came out, regarding AI, I think it's exciting. And I think things will always be evolving, and I want to stay on top of the trends. And
Totally.
And what are you busy with? Is it photography jobs? Is it videos? Is it, how-to, like what specifically is it? Stock? Like, I'd love to give our listeners a bit of context.
I think for me, it runs the gamut. Like, I purchase stock almost daily. I've done, one decent sized photo shoot. I'm working on a couple CG projects, and I've worked on a small like KOL video where we went and filmed KOLs. So for me, it runs the gamut.
Okay, that's key opinion leaders. I don't know if I didn't know that before I was in the business, but
thank you for pointing that out. Yes, I did, and then yes, a lot of people might not know.
Yeah, as they say on SmartList, for my sister Tracy, I don't know if anyone else.
Yeah, I love SmartList. That's so great.
I agree with Hannah, and since I do the paperwork for everybody, I have the bonus of seeing like the actual range of everything that's happening. And it is what Hannah said. It's so many different things. We've had the pleasure of doing some really big TV commercials in the past couple of years.
Yeah.
Which has been great. And, and then there's the, constancy of social outputs, and then like the huge gamut of everything in between. I think we're doing a ton of animation work, which I love. We have an illustration project coming down the pike, which always makes me happy. I've always felt that's an underutilized, such an underutilized medium, I think. But so, it's really a great mix, which I like because it keeps things interesting.
Yeah. And you do, Kim, you see, like, I think about that. Like, I have, like I said, I have a mishmash of projects that I'm focusing on, and and that's just my projects, but you're dealing with the paperwork for everybody. And there's like, what, 4 producers, 5 of us, that maybe 6 that you're like handling the paperwork for everybody. So I give you mad props for that.
Okay, so before we leave, well, first of all, thank you for that. That was the specifics around what you're working on was appreciated. I always ask everybody the same 2 questions, and they are, what's your favorite thing to do on a Sunday? And if you weren't a producer, what would you be? How about you going first, Kim?
Sunday is probably, well, copious coffee in the morning goes without saying. It's probably hiking and being outside or kayaking is my favorite thing to do on a Sunday. And then, do you want me to answer the second one? Or
Yeah, definitely.
If you weren't a producer, what would you be? It's interesting because in college, I was stuck between social work and art history. And I still feel like those 2 types of things are the things that speak to my heart the most. So if I wasn't a producer, I would probably be doing, I don't know, some kind of work in the community or something like that. Yeah.
How about you, Hannah?
On a Sunday, I do yoga in the morning and then, coffee. Have a newfound love of just going to the hardware store and like I'm working on my
kitchen.
Yeah, my kitchen or my house. And I'm like, oh, what do I need from the hardware store? And then I just roam around the hardware store.
I love that.
30 minutes.
The other thing that wasn't said about Hannah is that she's always entertaining. That's another thing that Hannah's known for, Heather, that I've always...
Oh, I'm missing out. I need to come visit.
Oh, yeah. She's always entertaining. Sorry.
And then, I think that if I wasn't our producer, I think I would want to do something in fashion, like a consultant, or my first major in college was fashion merchandising. And I think if I could draw, I'd be a fashion designer, but I can't draw.
Oh, that would be such a great talent. I'd like to be able to do that too.
Yeah.
Hannah has always been a stylist at heart, I think.
I think so. Yeah. Maybe I'll start a new career as a stylist.
Well, you guys, this was amazing. I absolutely love you both as friends, but also getting an hour to pick your brain and ask all the questions that I know I have and our listeners have. So thank you for giving me that, sharing that time with me and all of us. And I hope you have a wonderful summer.
Thank you.
Thanks, Heather. Thanks so much for everything you do for the industry.
Oh, thank you. You're welcome.
We love working with you.
Send us a picture of what you get at the hardware store next.
Oh, I will.
I'll see you guys later.
Okay. Bye, Heather.